I'm not doing this.
Cheers. For a couple of years ago, I bought my first camera, and that was a Canon camera. And you know how it is, you buy a couple of lenses, you try out different styles, but then you're sitting there with a bunch of Canon lenses and a camera, and you're starting to feel that, I want to change systems. I changed to Sony, and I still had some Canon L glass and some Sigma art lenses, but I couldn't really afford to buy like all the new lenses for Sony because that's expensive. So I bought the MC11 adapter, and what I learned from these months of adapted lenses is that Sigma lenses that are fully compatible with the MC11 really do perform as a native FE Sony lens. And that's why I still use my 50mm and 35mm art lenses from Sigma. And that's why I spent 3,500 euros on a lens like this with a Canon mount. And that, my friends, is what we're talking about in this video. So grab a coffee and let's go. So this is not really a review video of the 500mm f4 lens from Sigma, but I am going to cover some aspects that are worth mentioning before making a purchase of this lens, and then we're going to talk about how it performs on a Sony camera body together with the MC11 adapter, and if it's worth getting this over the two really expensive Sony prime lenses. The lens comes with a large bag that works as a backpack, and it's a great way to travel with the lens, and I personally use it as storage at home. So I store the lens inside the bag so my toddler doesn't break it. That would be a horrible situation. And this lens is a beast. So it weighs in at 3.6 kilograms with the lens hood on. If you leave the lens hood at home, you save 285 grams, which means you could bring the Mavic Mini 2 and the battery and still save some grams in your bag. It kind of shows how large this lens actually is, but I'd still recommend using the lens hood, obviously. So it's 389mm long without the lens hood and 532mm with it. It's not really a lens you bring on family vacation, but the aperture of f4 makes it worth the size in my opinion compared to a lens with a maximum aperture of 6.3 like the Sony 200-600. Just as an example, let's say you're shooting with the same ISO on both lenses. You'd go from a shutter speed of 1/500 of a second on 6.3 to 1/1250 on the f4 lens. That could potentially be the difference between a sharp photo of a flying bird to a blurry one. And that is, in my opinion, really worth the extra money and weight this lens has. But if you watch my review of the 200-600, you know that I still use that lens, and I use it in many different situations. If I need to like walk around with the lens, that's the lens I bring. But if I know where I'm gonna be, and if I know that I'm gonna shoot at low light, this is the lens to go. And the creamy bokeh you get on this lens is just beautiful. I absolutely love the image quality out of this lens. So, how does the autofocus perform on a Sony camera? I've been very pleased with how this lens performs with the MC11 on my A7 IV. I've tried it on different types of wildlife, and I find the sharpness sitting right almost every time. And I've heard that people have some problems with back or front focusing with this lens, but this can easily be solved with the USB docking station from Sigma that you can buy separately. I got lucky, and I find my lens reliable in terms of sharpness and autofocus, and I haven't really had the need to change anything with the docking station. I haven't compared the autofocus performance with a Canon camera, but as it performs so well with the MC11, I guess it's the full performance of autofocus we get out of it. But it would be fun to try it out on like a Canon 1DX or like the R5 or something. It would be cool to see, but I'm really pleased with how it performs on the A7 IV. I'm really happy that it works so well, because that was one of my biggest concerns before purchasing the lens, that buying a lens for this price, you really want professional performance, and I think it gives you just that. I've heard some people experiencing speed issues in the autofocus with the MC11 and problem tracking subjects that's coming towards the lens, but like I said, I haven't experienced any of these issues, and I hope I don't have to. Before I decided to purchase this lens, I checked Sigma's compatibility list to see if this lens was on it. To my benefit, the 500 f4 was on the list, which means that it's fully compatible with the MC11. Another way you can check this, if you have a lens, is to mount the lens on the MC11 and then on the camera. If you see a green light lighting up on the MC11, you know that it's fully compatible and the autofocus should work just as a native lens. But what about the lenses that aren't supported? Can you use them? Yes, you can. I have a Sigma 300mm 2.8 EX lens, which is a great lens for Canon. However, it's not supported by the MC11. So the autofocus doesn't work in all situations. I've been struggling with this and missed a lot of shots because of it. So I'm most of the time using that lens in manual focus nowadays. And I actually had the A7IV freeze on me when it tried to use the autofocus of that lens. It's some kind of bug that made it freeze. And I had to pull out the battery to restore the camera. So yeah, that's a problem you could have with a non-supported lens. Make sure that the Sigma lenses are compatible and you'll have a really nice experience with the adapter. One big issue with this setup that I had to bear in mind before I bought this lens is that the MC11 doesn't have weather sealing. So I can't use this lens when it's rainy outside or it's snowing a lot and stuff. However, I will buy a rain cover that I will use on rainy days this summer. This lens is pretty new to my setup, so I haven't really used it in these kind of rainy situations yet. I link everything down below that I'm gonna purchase and everything I have purchased regarding this setup. If you're planning to do the same, you can check that. Like, why don't Sigma make an MC11 weather seal? I would really like to see that. I would definitely pay like double up to get that feature, because nature photographers, we are outside, and sport photographers as well. So I really hope, if you see this, I don't think so, but if you do, make an MC11 adapter with weather sealing. Another thing to bear in mind if you're planning to buy this setup, if you have a Sony A1 or planning to buy one, using this lens, the A1 will be limited to 15 FPS continuous shooting. On a Sony native lens, you can shoot up to 30 FPS. That's a really cool feature to have as a wildlife photographer or a sports photographer. So bear that in mind if you're gonna use this setup. And as you see, I have this camouflage on my lens, which is from Roland Pro. This is really good because the lens is made of metal and it's really cold just touch when you're outside. So this kind of neoprene cover really helps with making it more comfortable holding and carrying around, as well as it's a really good cover for the lens if you're putting it down on like in the forest floor, or I do that all the time. I put down the lens everywhere, so the risk of getting scratches is pretty big without one. So I can highly recommend getting one of those for your lenses. The image stabilization on the lens is really good and it works really well in terms of like shooting. However, the lens is really heavy, so I can't walk around a whole day like hand holding shots because I'm too weak for that. These arms cannot do it, but maybe yours can. So why would you buy this instead of the Sony 600 or 400 2.8 lens? So if you have the money, and you have the money to spend on camera gear, go for the Sony ones because they are great, amazing lenses. But if you're like me and don't have 16,000 euros to spend on a lens, this is a really good alternative to the Sony ones. You get 500mm, which is pretty close to 600. You get the same aperture of f4, you get the sharpness, you get the image stabilization, you get it for more than half the price. You can buy an A1 and this setup for the price of the 600. However, we don't get the weather sealing, but there are workarounds, and if I'm gonna spend 10,000 euros just to get the weather sealing and a native Sony lens, I'd preferably put those money into camera body or like everything around the photography. But if you're looking to buy this setup, I can definitely recommend it if you know what you're getting into with the weather sealing and stuff. If you aren't already, make sure to subscribe. I'm soon gonna be hitting 15,000 subs, which is freaking awesome. So thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciate all the kind comments and everything you put out. I really appreciate it. that you're taking the time to watch my stuff. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And have a good one, because I'll see you in the next video. The camera is starting to overheat. A7IV, come on. Need to shut it down. Bye.